The emperor took a ride on horseback every day about 2 or 3 o'clock, accompanied by his officers and his escort. He rode about the city or the neighborhood and only returned in time for dinner. The emperor had a very large salon at the palace of the Kremlin. This room was divided into 2 parts by a beam or a cornice, supported by 2 columns, between which one passed from one part to the other. There was a tripod between the wall and the column on either side. This salon, which was probably the throne room of the Tsars, was ornamented with gilding, but this had become blackened by time. It was the finest room in the palace. In point of richness, I recollect having seen that there was a picture of the Madonna in several of the rooms in the left-hand corner at the opposite end of the entrance. And I have heard it said that when a Russian, even the emperor, came into the room, the first thing that he did was bow to the Madonna. The windows of the bedroom opened on the Moskva. It was a large room, an oblong square to the left of that which was occupied by the Valet de Chambre, from which it was only separated by a simple partition. In the left-hand corner made by the partition and the side opposite the windows, there was a little cylindrical desk placed diagonally across the corner, which was, I think, occupied by the fireplace. This desk had 3 screens of green silk, one pulled out to the right, another to the left, and the third upward. The emperor would sit at this desk, either to read or to write. This piece of furniture has stuck in my memory for this reason. The emperor, in his campaigns and even in his pleasure journeys, had a certain number of cases of books which were placed during the whole time of his stay, either in his cabinet or his bedroom. When he was bored or had nothing to do, he would take a volume, and when he had finished with it, he would lay it on the piece of furniture which was nearest to him. Well, during nearly the whole time that he remained at the Kremlin, The History of Charles VII by Voltaire, a pretty little volume in 18 bound in Morocco gilt edges, remained constantly on his desk. The emperor was far from believing at that time that his history would have so much analogy with the King of Sweden. A company of French actors, there were, I think, 10 or a dozen of them, which was at Moscow, had remained in the city after the Russians left during the fire. These poor people, most of whom had lost their luggage and had no means of existence, had come to the palace to ask for help. There were 2 women among them. When the emperor was informed of their presence and their unfortunate position, he gave orders for them to be taken care of. From then on, they had food. As from time to time there was a gathering or a soiree in the emperor's apartments, at which the officers of the household and principal officers of the guard were present, the actors were admitted 2 or 3 times to His Majesty's salon. When the French evacuated Moscow, these unfortunate people had nothing better to do than to go with us, and they marched with the baggage of the household. 2 poor women had much suffering to undergo. One of them, already advanced in years, was full of strength and energy, but the other, still young, was delicate and affected. One day during the retreat, I saw the former warming herself at a little bivouac of a few sailors of the guard. The cold was then beginning to make itself felt. These men, who came from the south of France, were already badly demoralized, were complaining of the terrible position in which they found themselves. They laid all their ills at the door of the emperor, who had brought them into this infernal country. They manifested their anger at the emperor by the most virulent expressions. This woman was trying to revive their courage and said to them, among other things, "You complain of the emperor, but you do not believe that he has as much to suffer as you, and that he has not been sorely afflicted by not being able to succor so many brave men who are here like you, who surround him and follow him? Do you not see him constantly in the midst of you, marching on foot and sharing your fatigues? Show more courage, have more energy, stand up against all the rigors of adversity. Remember that you are soldiers and Frenchmen." And she added, "And I, a poor woman who am already old, and I who have lost everything and am now deprived of the barest necessities, I who have no future, what is there that I have not to complain of? And yet in spite of my sufferings, which are renewed every hour of the day, I bear my ills with resignation and courage. What does weakness do but make us more miserable than we are? Let us hope, then, every day which passes us nearer to that good country which we shall reach, no doubt. But we need courage, perseverance. When one is young as you are, you ought to face and bear everything. In short, you ought to live on hope." When they left Moscow, the young actress, who had the good fortune to save some of her property from the fire, had put it in a small carriage drawn by young Cossack horses. She traveled sometimes on foot, sometimes on horseback with the transport of the household. One day, going down a hill, some cannon shots were heard on her left. The balls flew across the road, one of which, striking the carriage, broke it in such a way that it was quite useless. The poor woman, who at that moment was happily on foot, had to abandon her carriage and load her baggage as well as she could in the household baggage wagons. A few days later, I learned that she had lost all or the greater part of her property. I do not remember to have seen the unfortunate actress or their companions either at Smolensk or at Vilna. Like many others, they probably perished or were made prisoners. Chapter 3, the retreat from Russia. During the stay of the emperor in the Kremlin, there had been some conferences to begin negotiations with the enemy. Every day they had been waiting for a favorable reply, but when one reflects a little, what could be hoped from an enemy who had delivered such a city as Moscow to the flames? What had that enemy to lose now? The sequel proved that they only wished to beguile the emperor and fill him with confidence until they should have reorganized and collected their army to let us exhaust ours, to wear ourselves out in this city, which was only a heap of ashes, or in cantonments where there was nothing to eat, either for men or for horses, and finally to keep us in Russia as long as possible, in order that winter, which was advancing with great strides, should surprise us during our retreat while still far from any help. This policy was unfortunately successful for the Russians, who made us pay very dearly for the glory which we had in making the conquest of their holy city. Time passed rapidly and no satisfactory reply arrived at imperial headquarters at Moscow. Everybody appeared to feel in the most perfect security when we learned that the Russians had suddenly attacked the French advance posts. This unexpected news created a little anxiety. The emperor promptly set about replying to this aggression. The day for departure was set and orders were given to the army to march towards the south. We abandoned Moscow and its ruins on October 19th, I think.